So thank you to everyone who is joining. I wanted to start by welcoming you and welcoming back to those of you who have been here at other webinars. This is the fourth in our Tag Everything series. If you've missed any of the previous sessions, you can always catch up on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for WayAround. I'll also email out a link probably tomorrow with a recording of this webinar. Our webinar this week is a little bit different. It's part of our recognition of GAAD, which is Global Accessibility Awareness Day. It's officially on Thursday, but we're going to keep with our Tuesday webinars, and then we'll promote this webinar again on Thursday for those who want to go back and watch the recording. So far, we've talked about using WayAround to tag your personal items in your home and office. And this week, we're going to talk about the future of WayAround in public spaces, on manufactured products and appliances and other things. So if you do have questions about what types of way tags to use or how WayAround works, please send us an email. We'll be covering more of that next week. But this week, we're really going to focus on our panelists, all of who are working with WayAround to get WayAround out into public spaces and hear some of their ideas. So in terms of our agenda, I'll start with some housekeeping. Then Darwin Belt, who's a WayAround co-founder, will talk a little bit about his vision for WayAround and why he started the company with his friend Armand. And then we will have a conversation with our panelists, who I will introduce in just a moment. We are recording so that these can be preserved for the future for people who aren't able to make it on the live recordings. The recordings will all be on our YouTube channel, and I'll also email them out to everyone who's registered for the webinars. Probably you'll receive the recording tomorrow. If you're someone who prefers an audio only version because it helps you to hear it better, we can provide that as well. You should get that link tomorrow, and if it doesn't work for you, just send me an email, connect@wayaround.com, and I can get you the audio recording. And as I mentioned, for those of you who came in a little bit early, please turn off your cameras to help with the bandwidth for a large meeting. Beth, who's from WayAround, is helping to manage this session, so if she sees that your camera accidentally got turned on, she can go ahead and help you turn that off. I've muted all of the participants, but we do hope that this is an interactive session. So if you'd like to say something or ask a question, you can always send a chat to the hosts, and we'll get that and be able to respond to you or bring up your question to the panelists. You can also raise your hand. If you're on a Mac, that is Option Y. If you're on a PC, it's Alt Y. And if you're dialed in via phone, it's *9 to raise or lower your hand. And then when I call on you, I will unmute you. And if you've muted yourself, you will need to unmute yourself. So to unmute on a Mac, it's Command-Shift-A. If you're on a PC, it's Alt-A. And if you're on your phone, it's *6. And I can remind you of that again later. So again, today is really about talking about the future of WayAround. And if you have specific questions about what way tag you should use, how does WayAround work, please send me an email, connect@wayaround.com. I'd love to chat with you about your personal questions. And you can chat with the host at any time if you have a question. So I'd first like to introduce Darwin Belt, who is a co-founder of WayAround, and he and Armand Fisher are both architects by training. And Darwin, could you just spend a few moments talking about how and why you started WayAround and give people a little bit of background there?
I would love to. As Jessica said, Armand and I are both architects, and we went to school together and did our architectural internship together. And after we finished our internship, we formed a business together. And we worked together for a while, and then we decided that we wanted to take different paths and went different directions in our architectural careers. Well, many, many years later, we reconnected after both of us had retired. And when we did reconnect, Armand had lost his vision about 10 years prior to us reconnecting. And so I had a real empathy for Armand, because when I was about 30, I did lose my eyesight also totally in both eyes, but I had it restored through some laser treatments and through surgery. I still have vision issues. I'm colorblind, have some night blindness, and the vision is just not perfect, but I am able to see a bit. But when we started talking about our common experiences, especially in public spaces, we decided that both of us being architects, and with me having a background in designing software for architects and building information modeling, that we could resolve this problem. We could solve that problem. And so that's what we set out to do. And that's the beginnings of WayAround, is to solve getting information to people that are blind or visually impaired in public spaces.
Great, thank you, Darwin. And you know, as Darwin said, WayAround has really been a grassroots movement from the beginning. Darwin and Armin set out to create something that would, you know, meet their needs and also meet the needs of other people who have wide-ranging vision needs, whether you're low vision, colorblind, you really have no remaining vision, or people who are deafblind. And along the way, there have been people who have, you know, who have learned about WayAround and caught that vision and have made significant contributions to WayAround and our development. And today's panelists are some of these people. So without further ado, I will introduce our panelists. Neva Fairchild is the National Aging and Vision Loss Specialist for the American Foundation of the Blind, AFB. Neva has over 20 years of professional experience in the field of vision loss, and she has a lifetime of experience living with low vision. She's a vital part of AFB's Aging Initiative team, which involves the research and public policy needs of people experiencing vision loss later in life. The governor of Texas appointed her to the Rehabilitation Council of Texas, and she served as the chair of that in fiscal years 2018 and 2019. Welcome, Neva.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm very happy to be here.
Wonderful. And our next panelist is Paul Parravano, who is the co-director of Government and Community Relations for the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Paul works for senior management. He represents the university with federal, state, and local government. And he also works with regional nonprofits and serves on a variety of boards on behalf of the university. Paul uses lots of assistive technology in his work and his personal life. And Paul, we're delighted to have you today.
Thank you very much, Jessica. I'm delighted to be here.
And our third panelist is Charlie Warren, who is a certified orientation and mobility specialist at the Carroll Center for the Blind, which is outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And in his career, he's worked with children and adults of all ages. Charlie has a background in art, and he's worked to fabricate individualized assistive devices to provide solutions for people with disabilities. Charlie enjoys studying the development of pedagogies for blinded adults in late 19th and early 20th centuries, and he plans to attend a PhD program on social inclusion and global development. Charlie, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Great, and each of these experts were asked to participate in our panel today because they've been really forward-thinking about assistive technology, and they've also been really forward-thinking about how WayAround can be used. So thank you, first of all, for all the contributions you've made. And I'd love to start just by talking about some of the ways that you're working with us and ideas you have for WayAround's technology. And Neva, you are probably the first person who saw WayAround outside of our team several years ago. And can you talk just a little bit about what initially caught your attention?
Well, at the time I was working at the Center on Vision Loss, which was a part of the American Foundation for the Blind at the time. And we had so many different solutions, but when I saw WayAround, I thought this could replace quite a lot of those solutions, and it could actually enhance what we were doing by helping people know what is in each room of our demonstration center, to understand the reason that things were there, because it had such potential for adding text to a simple tag. And eventually we tagged the entire center. And it was an amazing addition to our program, and helped me with training new volunteers and helped those volunteers to show what was possible with smartphone technology, as well as to illustrate the highlights of our tour.
Great. And Neva, I know you've seen a lot of different iterations of WayAround. Do you think, does it look anything today like what it looked like 3 or 4 years ago?
Well, amazingly enough, it does, but it looks, you know, like it's gotten a facelift and a whole new wardrobe at the same time. The structure is very much the same. The beginning concepts of keeping it simple and structuring information in a way that makes it easy to get to, and making it work with the existing technology on smartphones, whether it's iPhone or Android, makes makes it so much more powerful than I think I ever dreamed it could be. And you know, when it was first introduced to me, it was really only for public spaces. But then, you know, the realization that using it for personal tasks was really powerful, and work-related, office-related tasks was really powerful. And that at some point, people have to get used to, you know, what is this? How does it work? Why do I even want it? And so that's probably easiest learned at a personal level. But it's exciting to me, and I had the privilege of working a conference with Jessica and several other staff members from WayAround, where we introduced the public space aspect of WayAround. And I just can't really explain how liberating it was to get off the elevator and use my phone. Now, I had to know that a tag was there, but luckily I was in the know. And we advertised it to everybody that was at the conference. And I was able to get off that elevator and read that tag and swipe my way through information that, as a person who has no functional vision left, I never have access to in a public space. Like which way to go to the restrooms and which way to go to the conference rooms and how the conference rooms are laid out and which way the hallways go. And it was just amazing. And then to be able to introduce that to all of the people there who work in the field of blindness and visual impairment was a real privilege and honor. And the excitement of those people was as contagious as Darwin's original excitement and Armin's original excitement about the project.
Great. Thank you, Neva. And, you know, one thing you brought up is just that, you know, using WayAround personally in your home and office. And a lot of our conversations in this webinar series have been about that. But Paul, you called me about a year ago with a really interesting idea for using WayAround. And it was something in your home. Could you describe the problem that you were trying to solve?
Sure. Thank you, Jessica. You know, I lost my sight when I was an infant, so I have spent a lifetime kind of tailoring my need to get information from the world around me. So I've used a lot of different solutions, and I think WayAround, when I first heard about it, really offered some very specific and powerful ways to identify things in a more complete way than I'd been accustomed to. But the idea that caused me to call Jessica about a year ago is that WayAround takes advantage of some exciting technology called NFC, and you know, the way that your phone interacts with tags uses NFC. And I think that there ought to be, I believe that there ought to be a way to think about manufacturers building in NFC capability into a variety of appliances and different devices that you have around the home that will give you the kind of information that you need, because we no longer live in a time when we had dials and clicks and buttons that we could identify and label in Braille. But in many cases, touch screens and buttons hold a huge variety of information, so that holding your finger on a button is different than just tapping a button. And I'm using the word button very loosely because, again, there aren't many buttons, but putting your finger on a screen and knowing a little bit about where to put your finger on the screen and what happens if you leave it there for 3 seconds or you just tap it. All of that is just the beginning of what you need to know in order to operate, say, a dishwasher or an oven screen, and to get it to do what you want it to do, and do it independently. I mean, I have my family, and so I've been able, to rely on others to get stuff done. But, we want independence. We want liberation from having to rely on other people. And I think that machine learning and artificial intelligence, and now what WayAround offers through this possibility, just widens the circle significantly on the kinds of information that we could get from the devices and appliances that we rely on for daily living and for information.
And Paul, one of the things that I remember talking about with you a year ago is that I'm sighted, and I have the same problem of, do I press this button and hold it, or do I tap it? And it does different things. And the machines are so smart and sleek these days that, sometimes I don't even know what settings I'm pressing. I just know that it makes it go. So this is, there are specific challenges for people with sight loss. And also machines are very complicated, and it's hard to know all the different settings that can help you do what you're wanting to do. So it got me excited that it could really help a large variety of people to make better use of things in their homes.
I think so. And what's exciting about this is that I think manufacturers are hungry for getting access to people who don't rely on their vision necessarily, because, as I'm sure we've all heard and probably said to each other and to ourselves, that as people get older, they can rely less on their vision, that their vision starts to change and decrease. Not to mention the people who have had vision problems, low vision or no vision, for most of their lives. The manufacturing group, if you go, for example, to the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, there is now, excuse me, there's now a whole section of manufacturers and developers, both for software and machinery, that is dedicated to accessibility. And so I think that illustrates that WayAround has a very natural fit into this discussion about how we can design appliances of the future, and not that far into the future. I think what we're talking about here is very doable, and using these different techniques to connect with your iPhone. We've used Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, but NFC is sort of a different and very successful. I've seen it now with a number of different apps that I have, where you can get quick, clear, precise information about the piece that you're trying to connect with your iPhone.
Wonderful. I think those are great points about the benefits of NFC: quick, clear, and precise.
Yeah.
And Charlie, you work hands-on with people teaching skills. And what got you excited about WayAround for your clients at the Carroll Center?
Well, I'm an orientation and mobility specialist, so I like to think a lot about accessing public spaces, and sort of that's my angle at the Carroll Center for the Blind. And what we do is provide training for people to learn to be independent whenever their vision loss has occurred. We provide the skills training. So what got me excited about WayAround was that it was using an existing technology that's familiar, that I know about, NFC. I know people are already using that with a Pen Friend, which is a product we provide training on, but there's more options with WayAround. And the idea of a publicly administered network was very exciting to me. So there's kind of two parts. First, there's imagining how you could be providing this information as a part of signage in different environments, in a building, at a park, at the zoo, all these places, right, where there's sort of access problems when it comes to signage and information. And, you know, sometimes there's Braille, sometimes the Braille is wrong, you never know. And then the second part is, okay, so if we have this method for accessing information, how do we then teach individuals of all ages how to access it, how to obtain those skills? So those are sort of those are the two parts of it. There's the advocacy, but then you actually have to have people be prepared to use it. So I feel more comfortable with it because it's familiar. And then on the creative side, when I'm thinking about instruction, I'm like, okay, well, you know, what do I need to make that work? And Jessica has been so great, because I just say like, okay, so say we're working with a kid and they want to do a scavenger hunt. The instructor needs to be able to log into the app. And then the kid needs to be able to log into the same account. So the instructor sets up the scavenger hunt, and then the kid can log into it on their parent's phone or whatever, yada, 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 do the scavenger hunt. And then that kid has the skills to use NFC tags. And then if this becomes part of public spaces, or when they go to the zoo on a field trip and, you know, they can't see the animals. I've been there with a kid on a zoo field trip. And so, you know, if the signs linked to cool information that they could have access to, you know, who knows what else. So that is what got me excited about WayAround, that it's, you know, familiar but different, new capabilities, very responsive people to talk to, and the idea of a publicly administered network that it was possible to edit. Because like you get the Braille sign and it's wrong, and then you say something about it, and then they get back to you, and then, you know, it's just a lot harder to change than being like, oh, can we edit this NFC tag? And it's like someone's job to do that. You know, it's not that, it wouldn't be that hard. So that's what's exciting.
Well, and I think that's, you know, a drawback of anything that's printed, you know, whether it's Braille or, you know, printed in, you know, English or another language, is that it does take a long time to produce. And then, you know, if information changes, you have to recreate it in order to update it. Where with the tag, it can supplement that signage, and you can, you know, if you're in a center that, like Neva mentioned, the conference, and there's constantly changing events, you know, you can easily update it without having to produce really expensive print signage, or you can, you know, supplement the information. So that's a great point, Charlie. And I see that there's a question from Diana. Diana, I am going to unmute you. Go right ahead.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm unmuted.
Oh, you're on, Diana. Go ahead. It looks like, let's see, I think you're muting yourself and then unmuting. Let me get back to the code. Okay, I think you're unmuted now. Go right ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because my microphone doesn't show that. Yes, they were talking about public places and zoo and ample places. I have some site left, but being in DC a few times, have been in Boston a few times. Of course, I love museums. And I noticed, for example, in DC, they are more geared towards education. So they have big letters, they have everything like the contrast, white letters in darker backgrounds. But I saw that museums, I had to use IRA to learn about the paintings that appealed to me. And of course, they told me about details that I could not see in a painting at all. But some of these museums don't have, most of them, they don't have all the art in that audio catalog that we get when we get in, right? Mm-hmm. So how WayAround would be used in there. I mean, if they don't have the text, I'm just talking like in a broad sense, because of course there's a lot of museums in the US and all over the world, but basically talking the ones that I visited, and I could not access the data, the information that was written in there.
Sure. Charlie, do I see your hand?
Yeah, I raised my hand.
Yeah, go for it.
So like, just to think about AFB and the history of AFB, there was a time in the US when Braille wasn't the standard, and there were competing forms of tactile reading. There was New York Point, there was Moon Type, there was all this stuff, right? So if you lived in Boston and you went to a school for the blind, you couldn't really have a friend in New York and be pen pals because you had New York Point and you had Braille. And this went on for a really long time. And one of the really important things that AFB was a part of was making that a standard, right? And then the small amount of money that was available for library books for the blind, instead of being divvied up into all these different texts, it's just Braille, so people can have access to more variety. So yes, there's a lot of work to be done. You would have to be able to act on the assumption that the signs are accessible. So say, you know, we have architectural access standards, right? They say the signage should have Braille, it should be at this height. So if you're using a wheelchair, you can read it, it should be at this contrast. But it doesn't say anything about you should be able to access it. You know, say you lost your sight and you haven't learned Braille yet, or, you know, so there, or you're not blind and you have another disability that would make it more convenient for you to access it with the phone. So it's not there yet, but there have been other times in the past where because there's competing systems, things are less effective than you would want them to be.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Darwin, would you like to talk a little bit about the ADA, which for those of you not in the US is the Americans with Disabilities Act, and some of the regulations that Diana mentioned as far as contrast and font size are part of the ADA. And Darwin, as an architect, you're very familiar with that.
Yes, the ADA was, it actually evolved over time. And it began with a grassroots movement. It began with people just complaining because they could not have access to public spaces, especially people in wheelchairs. You know, there were no ramps to go over a curb. Sometimes it was only steps into a building. There were not ramps. And so people began to start from the grassroots of complaining about things, and they would talk to their local vendors, and they began talking to state legislators. And finally, in 1973, there was a declaration that pulled all of the different types of disabilities together and created a class, you know, that before they would address each individual disability, whether it was mobile type of disability, hearing loss, or vision loss. But in 1973, they pulled all those together to create just being disabled as one class. And so they started deciding to try to make things accessible and removing barriers for all disabilities. It took them about 4 years to actually develop some of those rules. And they finally came up with some of those rules in 1978. But that was still not the actual implementation of ADA. They began creating things that had to be done. There had to be ramps to get into a building. There had to be, you know, toilet stalls that you could get into with a wheelchair. And you could not just change everything because of the limitations of space. And so it sort of evolved over a period of time. And they required buildings whenever they were being remodeled that they had to be updated to the new standards. And so it took a while, but the point is that there's even been times that businesses have come back and said that's just too costly. And so there was even a time when the Supreme Court and several even a president or two was very against all the restrictions put on business to create this. But the grassroots people came back and said, no, there is a need for this. We cannot go to work. We cannot do things to access things. And so it continued to grow and has evolved. There's been 2 or 3 editions of the ADA, and it's grown to this point now that there are actual standards that have to be met. But it's an ever evolving thing. And as we've moved into new technology right now, the last couple of things that have happened, the main points for the ADA standards have been to remove architectural barriers and communications barriers. And so we're seeing a lot of that communications barriers being addressed through having access through the internet, websites. And so that's kind of a focus right now of that communications. And I see what we're doing is being that next level of just having access in public spaces. And so that's what we're hoping that will happen, again, with the grassroots movement.
Jessica?
Go right ahead, Paul.
Hi, sorry. I think Darwin makes me think of a bunch of things. I really believe that the strength of WayAround is the incredible amount of added flexibility that you have. And let me give you an example. When I was young and, I learned Braille, fortunately, very young, because Braille is just one of the tools that you, if you're lucky enough, I think, to learn it as a kid, that you have in your toolbox. And I remember getting, I think from AFB way back when, these little aluminum tags with 2 letters on them that told you a color, like BK for black or BL for blue. And you could sew those on your clothes and, identify, I think people use them as clothing tags. Well, that really didn't tell me anything. It told me what color something was, but what do I know about what color goes with what the shade was, whether there were stripes? I didn't know any of that. So I developed my own system to put numbers on all my clothes so that I knew that if a jacket was number 50, I have written down in a little file system all the numbers of the ties and shirts that go with it, since I have to wear a tie just about every day. So WayAround really updates the whole system, because there you can put in any amount of information that you want, relatively speaking, about what else this jacket or this suit might go with, and just have one of the smaller tags that you can sew onto your clothes that that work very well and accomplish what I need. Whereas the very sort of limited information about color didn't help someone like me. It may have helped other people who either had some vision or used to have vision, and they understood the color thing, and I didn't. So I think that what WayAround offers is an avenue into the future, because it provides such a wider array of information that you have. And that's just what you need with these, going back to what I was talking about earlier, the machines and the buttons that do each button does 3 or 4 plus different things, or if it's in combination with another button, you hold them down together and it does something else. That's the direction that technology is going in. We've learned to do it with the iPhone. One last quick example, Jessica, is I use a Mac computer, which a lot of blind people don't. But what I like about the Mac is that there's great flexibility. If you can't do something with a keyboard, then you can use your trackpad, which is the same as using your iPhone. Most blind people many blind people use iPhones. So that is the key to the future, I think. It's flexibility and being able to tailor and customize the amount of information that is available to you in a WayAround tag.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, go ahead.
Could I add that the access to information is so flexible with WayAround, because it's not just, like you said, Paul, just the color. It's print information can be made readily accessible, contextual information, like what's happening in this space right now, like at a conference or at a public venue, and also then access to layouts and emergency information for buildings and directories of, you know, where is that doctor's office anyway? And from the elevator, which way do I go? And those types of things that you don't have as a person who is blind by simply, you know, gazing around and saying, oh, there's the women's restroom. Great. You know, and or looking down a hallway, no water fountain that way, and look down another hallway, oh, there's the water fountain. I don't have that luxury. Now I can walk up and down both sides of both halls and eventually I'll probably find the darn thing, or it'll kick in to refrigerate some water and I'll then know where it is. But to have even advanced knowledge of that before I arrive at a venue is so powerful. And then when I'm in the space, to have that contextual information it's impossible to replace. And the way I just want to end with, the WayAround app gives me access to as much or as little of that as I need. Whereas so many other labeling and information access systems dump all the information at me at one time. It's kind of like learning to use a computer with a screen reader where it reads from the top of the page to the bottom of the page all at once, versus learning to use a screen reader with a computer and knowing the keyboard commands and the trackpad motions to get you to just that tidbit you need. It's so powerful to me in that way.
Those are great points. Thanks, Neva. And we have a bunch of people with hands up. Brent, on your iPhone, you are unmuted. Go right ahead.
Yes, I was thinking of like if I went to a place like a psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever, and there's a door that's not labeled. If I ask them and they say, yeah, you can go ahead and put a tag on there, and I put one of my WayAround tags on there, and it says, you know, what the door is and stuff. How do we make that accessible for everybody as opposed to just to my own you know, personal phone? You know, because you know, maybe a building may not want to spend a bunch of money to get a whole bunch of individual tags to put on things, but they could say, okay, well, if you got your own tag, you can do it, but then it wouldn't be available for somebody else. So I was wondering maybe they could make some kind of tags that, you know, call them public tags or something that people could buy and put on there, and they wouldn't have necessarily the code that would be on an individual tag to make it only accessible for your own account. You know, then anybody could read them.
Yeah, that's a great thought. And Darwin, I see you're smiling. What are your thoughts?
Well, I appreciate the comment. That is a great thought and problem, because you do not have that capability of making that tag public to everyone. We do have that capability of making that tag public. In fact, we have several organizations that we have already given them that capability. We are charging for that aspect of making tags public, and we're doing that. There's several reasons. One is that we don't want information just to be out there in any format. We want to standardize the format so that if you go to a tag, you know, somewhere in Boston and that's trying to, you know, in some sort of doctor's office, like you explained, how to get to the information of what's behind that. There may be some other information of how to exit or how to get to the stairs or the elevator. And so we want to standardize that format of how to do that. And so we're going to be very restrictive on making information public. We will probably end up making things, you know, as groups. But for example, with that particular office, we can make that office an organization that they could make that accessible, but we would have controls over what they actually put there and put it in a standardized format. And as you look at the detail types on our app, that is a way that we will make things standard. If you go back and look at the groceries, there are particular items that are in a very specific order that you would answer. You'll put a checkbox or select from certain things. And so therefore, everyone that reads that information on groceries is in that very specific order. We will do the same thing with public tags, that we will always have information that describes this space. That will always be the first thing. There may be a next tag that tells you what's in that space, how it's laid out, what, how to get to someone with information. The next thing may always be how to get to an elevator or a vending machine. Then the last thing may be how to get to the closest exit. And so we will standardize those things so that no matter where you go, whether it's in Dallas, Texas, or Italy, or South Africa, wherever you go, that same information will be in a standardized format. So we have some things that we'll be talking about later here before we end the show here of how we are going to make that happen and how it's going to happen quickly. We feel like we can make it happen very quickly.
And I think that will avoid the problem that was described earlier about all the different types of Braille that people would encounter. Can you imagine in those days being a person who read New York Point and traveling to Boston and they had managed to put some Braille signs up, but you couldn't read them. So now there's two ways you can't read: print and that other kind of Braille.
Great. I'm seeing a question from Katie. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to unmute you, Katie. All right, Katie, I think you may need to, yep, you're on. Go right ahead, Katie.
Yes, you mentioned about notifying or doing announcements or something in that regards so everybody can hear it. And if you have a tag that's open to the public, would it be someone that can, only one specific person that can edit, or how does that work?
Right, that's a great question. So it's based on an organization. So Diana earlier had mentioned a museum. So if the museum wanted to install way tags, they could have, one or more administrators who work at the museum who would decide what types of information go onto that way tag. And again, as Darwin said, we're working on standards so that if you go to one museum, the information would be formatted very similarly, but the museum still has control over, the actual text and audio files, other things that they might put there. So it's not something that the general public would be able to go in and edit, but it is, it would be very much like a website. There's an administrator that can edit and update that, and then other people would be able to benefit from the information.
One of the things too that about our system, a lot of people do not understand this or know this, is we can update tags remotely. You do not have to be at the tag remote to edit that tag or create that tag. We have to link a system to that tag, but once it's linked, you can edit that tag, you can update it remotely. So as Neva was talking earlier about circumstantial things, again, going into a conference where it's set up one way and then the next hour they change the setup, they have different speakers, they may do things differently. Those things can be edited remotely, and they can even be pre-planned so that they change over at a certain time without ever even having to go to that tag. We've already done that. One of the things that we have done with many people to impress them is we'll send them a sheet of paper and we will update, they'll read that, they'll scan it with their tags, and we say, okay, now we're going to update that. And I update it, here in Dallas when they're in Boston, and I say, okay, scan it again, and it's immediately updated. And so we can do that. In fact, when you purchase your way tags, that tag that is in the top left-hand corner, when you scan that, I have the ability to update that here. And one of the things that we will begin doing is creating things on those different tags where we can update them to give you more information about how to use a particular tag type. So the public spaces, that's one of the key things, is being able to update it without having to go to that tag.
And Darwin, we have a couple of questions coming in through the chat about, if there was a museum or another public space, how would they get involved with WayAround?
Yeah, the number one thing is just have them contact us. They can get in touch with Jessica or send a request through connect@wayaround.com. Right now, as we are evolving things, we have been doing research and development over the past 4 years. As Neva mentioned earlier, we installed our first public tags were about 2 years ago, year and a half ago, at a conference in Arlington, Virginia. And we tagged simply elevators and restrooms. We have also worked with micro markets, putting tags on the shelves for displays of food. We installed in Atlanta, Georgia, and we had installed something up in, I believe it was Connecticut. We have worked with the California micro market organization to even get it approved. They will not let micro markets in yet because they're not accessible. But they said that WayAround would make that accessible. They would approve micro markets even coming in. And so we've worked with several museums. We've worked with universities. So we now understand what it is that we want to do. So now it's just a time to, okay, let's start implementing. We've looked at it from multiple different perspectives. We know what we want to do to make things be consistent, no matter whether you're reading an appliance, whether you're going to a museum, or whether you're going to a restroom, or you're an outdoor park, or a transportation, reading that bus stop sign to know the schedules of the buses. We can do that. We know how to do it. We just want to work with individuals to install that, to make sure that it truly works in those individual locations. So the best way that they can do that is contact us, and we will work with them to get that installed.
Can I jump in here for a second?
Please do, Charlie.
I wanna throw something out there and get a chance to ask Paul and Neva questions, because that's exciting for me and also Darwin. But just wanted to talk about how accessible signage happens now, right? So I will probably need some correction on this, but if state or federal dollars are touching your project in any way, when you do your renovation, then you have to meet ADA compliance standards, and there's federal and then there's state. So in Massachusetts, if there's state dollars touching your project, you need to meet, there are standards regarding signage, right? And those include contrast and height and braille, right? And Darwin said it was a grassroots movement, and talked about complaining, but I'd love to call it advocacy. So there was all this advocacy that people did. So if you want, WayAround or something like WayAround to be a part of public spaces, then it's actually a political approach. And that's why I wanted to ask, Paul and Neva about, in their roles, and then also bring up the idea of unintended consequences with ADA, because mobility impairments were thought of, so ramps were put in, but people who are blind have been taught to find curbs and can't feel the ramp. So then they had to come up with the tactile domes that, have their own unintended consequences. So that's what's nice about the editability of WayAround, is because we make mistakes, and giving ourselves an eraser is great. Braille is hard to erase. So are the bumps. Though the snow plows seem to do a great job just shaving off the bumps, but that's I'm digressing. So I'll mute myself.
No, go ahead, Neva.
I was just going to say, you bring up a great point, Christopher, that, unintended consequences. I'm pretty sure the wheelchair ramp is going to be the death of me yet, because I end up in the middle of streets when I don't realize I'm there. And yet I wouldn't for anything have them taken away, because my roommate in college used a wheelchair for mobility in the 1970s. I know how hard it was to get around before, the Barrier Act was enacted, and, it had time to be implemented. I think the fact that WayAround is so flexible, and once the tags are installed, and there's going to be a standardization of how and where they're installed in public places too, it's going to make it possible to correct those mistakes if we come across them, or to make changes that public space encounters. Like, this door is no longer the door to the nurse's office. This is the door to the COVID-free zone. like we're going to ever have that. But anyway, you know what I'm saying? Our world has changed a lot in the last 3 months. And I'd be willing to bet that there's a lot of signs out there that are getting printed to say, stop here to have your temperature taken, that I'll never see. So there better be a person standing there to say, excuse me, ma'am, And those kinds of things, to be flexible with that is going to be vital. And then to have all sorts of information, whether it's print or contextual, doesn't really matter to me, just so I have access to that information, and all the people that I work with and that I know who are blind or visually impaired have access to it, or that have print disabilities other than vision loss, or that have literacy issues. All of these things play into the fact that if something can be spoken to some people, even when they have 20/20 vision, it's still valuable to them. And the ability to add more information later is just, it's huge. The consequences of having the lack of that information are untold over the years of people's loss of independence or lack of independence, and their inability to perceive themselves as capable humans, because there's so many times in their lives where they have to ask a family member or a coworker or a stranger for information. How powerful is that, to just empower somebody with that access to the right information, and information that can be changed. You know, if there's an emergency, all the tags can be changed to only emergency information. This is how you get out of this building. That to me is just, it's going to be life-changing. And I, for one, can't wait to see it in public spaces. And that's what we have to do.
And just to build on that, that, you know, that's the big struggle I see is access to information. And one of the things that drew me to this world is the creativity in the community of people who are blind, and, you know, people who are in their lives. Like, I've discovered eBay in this time of COVID. And so I have a broken Braille watch from 1927. And I think someone made it for their friend. So it has little dots on it. So it's like information access, right? That I need to know the time. So someone had to make this for me. You know, there were some commercially available, but not that many. And then my real prize was a Hall Brailler. And Neva, you should know what this is, but this was the first Braille typewriter in the United States, invented by Frank Haven Hall, 1892. And that was the big impetus for Braille being adopted, right? Because his typewriter was better than the New York Point one. That one was called a kaleidograph, really cool, kind of hard to use. This one, very easy. So, and then Braille becomes standard. So sometimes invention, you know, and maybe WayAround can play a role in just the standardization of access to information. And that's just the struggle. And that's also the fun part too, because you get to be really creative. And that's what drew me to WayAround, because I feel like as a, you know, educator, practitioner, whatever, even artist, you can be flexible with it and do what you want. You know, it's a tool. It's like a cane, right? The cane has been around for a while. It's pretty simple, doesn't run out of batteries, yada, yada, yada. WayAround is also simple in a way that I enjoy as someone who evaluates different things for their usefulness for someone who is blind or visually impaired.
And Charlie, that is such a great point, and one that we're actually going to end on, because we have about 6 minutes left until the hour is up. So I'm going to thank Paul, Neva, and Charlie for joining us as panelists. I know there are a ton of hands up that we just have not gotten to. This has been a great discussion. I think we could all be here for another probably 2 hours, but we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. If you have questions, please email me, connect@wayaround.com, and it's right in my inbox. So if you have a question that you think others could benefit from, send it to me soon so I can include it in some of the wrap-up communications and recordings that go out tomorrow. And Darwin, I'd love to give you a few minutes just to talk about some of the public projects that we're working on now and how people can get involved.
Yeah, we are actually installing at several different locations using our public organizations to make that information available to the public. But one of the things that that we want to do is we feel like every individual on this webinar every individual that has a disability can participate in some way. And we want to make it available for you to make an impact. And making that impact is not just giving us an idea to tell us how to do it. We want you to do something. The first thing that you can do is just start being very vocal, both to the places that you go in public spaces, and ask people about, why aren't you making things accessible to me? There's a company that can do that. It's not very expensive. It can be updated. You can do that. So talk to different organizations that you go to, whether it's a restaurant or some sort of store or even a park or whatever. Be vocal on social media. Go even to our WayAround, the App Store on Apple. Give us comments. Talk about it. Tell why you love it. Give us a 5. If you can't give us a 5, call us. Connect with us so we can fix whatever you can't give it a 5 for, and then we'll fix that, and then you can give it a 5. We want people to know about what we're doing. Go on the Apple Viz Store. Talk about things that you can do at home. In fact, one of the reasons we specifically chose the home and office product first is we want people to be very familiar with this product and learning it in their home, so that when we go out into public spaces, you won't have to learn a system. You will already know it. So just start being vocal on whatever type of social media. If you're involved in an organization, American Foundations for the Blind, or NFB, ACB, if you've got local chapters, tell other people about it. If you're a chapter president, tell the other chapter presidents. Get the word out that we can start making things accessible, both in your home. But if we have a lot of people using this, some of these manufacturers will start to put it on their appliances and in their stores beforehand. And in fact, one of the things that happens when we are talking to manufacturers, they always ask us, well, how many users do you have? Well, the more users we can tell them, the more apt they will be to install that. And one of the things that you can do too is, if you've already purchased WayAround, use it. One of the other questions that many of these manufacturers ask us is not just how many people have installed, but how many people are actually using it. How many have only tagged 1 tag? How many have tagged 10? How many have tagged 50? How many have tagged more than 100? So the more tags that you tag, the more information we can give these manufacturers, and the more likely they will be to use that. And then last of all, if you have some very specific projects, if you're an organization that you would like to have WayAround install as a public tags at your location, or if you know of someone that would like to do that, get in touch with us. Send us the information through connect@wayaround.com. We will get back in touch with you and talk to you specifically about that project. One of the things that we're also looking at doing is even making maybe some very specific things like Neva talked about, tags at elevators and maybe restrooms, using some sort of national organization, like the Lions Club or some of those service clubs that really have vision loss at the heart of their organization, that we may be able to do a fundraising where we train them how to put tags at just those 2 locations, and they, as businessmen, go out and approach other businesses and install it to introduce it to businesses. So if you have any ideas, if you want to get involved with us of installing, send us that information at connect@wayaround.com. But don't just give us ideas. We want you to do something. Do get active on social media, telling people about WayAround so that we can make this happen quickly.
Yeah, and Darwin, we don't want to forget our friends who use Android. You can also review us on the Google Play Store, and we would love for you to do that. So thanks for all the Android users who have been chatting at me. We love you guys too.
Sorry about that.
And it's all good. And again, the email address connect@wayaround.com. I know several people have said, do you have anything in this state, or, are you working with universities? Yes, we're working with universities. We're working with schools for the blind. blind. We're working with some museums. And the next step is working with organizations that want to help us set those standards. So please get in touch. We want to work with you, the people who are using WayAround. Almost every public organization that's using WayAround heard about us because of a current WayAround user. So please help us get the word out. Thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you again to Neva, Paul, and Charlie. You guys are great. We do have some follow-up questions for you that I'll connect with you on. And for everyone who we didn't get to your hand raised, please do send me an email and I will make sure to answer your questions. And tune in next week for our final webinar in the Tag Everything series, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time next Tuesday. And we will be talking about some systems that you can implement, standards that you can implement around your own home and office for tagging some of your things. So thanks again.